For those who may not know, I'm Father Stephen, and thank you for being with us this evening. We very much welcome the Mayor of Ards and North Down, including all of the Hollywood area, the whole way down the peninsula. And she very graciously asked that I would be one of her chaplains during this year, which was a great honour to me indeed. Viv is going to give all the introductions. I just want to welcome you because I have to leave shortly. And thank you very much for joining us. Over to Viv. And Mayor, you're very welcome.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, Father, although you stole some of my best lines there. Welcome everybody to the latest talk in our parish on a Wednesday evening. Hopefully there'll be 3 or 4 more during the course of the winter. It's a particular pleasure to welcome Gillian, who I've known for a long time. A small pen portrait of Gillian. She's from Banbridge, as I'm sure some people in the room or in the church might know. And she was educated in St Mary's Primary School and then Banbridge, and then went to the University of Liverpool, where she studied law. After that, she went into PR for a short period of time, and then became an eminent solicitor with Eamon McAvoy & Co., who was a very famous solicitor back then, which isn't that long ago, but he really was a bit of a legend. And Gillian then married and moved to this parish, and 5 children, all of whom were educated here or in Bangor, where they initially lived, and then in some St Patrick's and Sullivan. And Gillian has a big connection with the local education sector, where she was in the PTA here in St Patrick's and also in Sullivan, but also was the chairman of the Board of Governors in St Congil's in Bangor, and also in the primary school in Donaghadee, which the name of which escapes me.
St Anne's, I thought.
St Anne's. It's on. This is all from memory. No, it's not too bad. Gillian was a student member of the Alliance Party of Northern Ireland. Always had an interest in local politics. She then stood for election in the local council in 2023 and was successfully elected, and her meteoric rise to the top has continued to this day, and she's now our mayor. I was surprised but absolutely delighted when I learnt that news, so it's not too many people you can talk to and say that you know your local mayor, so I'm going to hand over to Gillian now, who will entertain us and inform us over the next 20 minutes or so. And afterwards there'll be a Q&A and then tea and coffee. Thank you very much.
Viv has more or less stolen everything I was going to say there, because I was just really going to tell you who I was for and what, how I'd got here. I'm here under slightly false pretenses, I will say as well, because he texted me after meeting one day and said, "I'm a parish councillor, is there any chance you'd come and talk to us?" Us be thinking that's the parish council. So it was a bit of a surprise to me when a pal screenshotted me the extract of the parish bulletin, inviting everyone to come, which I haven't been entirely what I have in mind. But nonetheless, it really is a pleasure and a privilege to be here, not only in my own church, but among my own, and to be here as mayor, which is an extraordinary privilege, which I'll talk about later. So, yes, started off in South County Down, here now in gosh, that's quite alarming, here in North County Down, but born into a Catholic family in Banbridge, which I know at least one of you knows exactly what that's like. But Banbridge was then a reasonably well integrated and harmonious, but largely unionist town. And unionism back then, I'm really talking about my kind of conscious formative years, would have looked like flags around the 12th, but not at any other time of the year. And those of us who lived and worked in Catholic business in the town, my father was a publican and an undertaker and a grain merchant and a spirit grocer and all of that kind of old-fashioned sort of business. And he had been born and reared into that business, and they all lived very harmoniously around that. Nonetheless, it was the Troubles. And my dad's pub was the police pub, because the barracks was immediately opposite. So I suppose that hinterland was the atmosphere of the town that I grew up in, and my family were well known and had a lot of connections with unionist families in the town who were our family friends. We went on holidays together. When it came time for me to go to secondary school, I had a very happy primary school education at St Mary's, where my dad was on the Board of Governors. My mum was the PE teacher in the local Catholic high school, and it was assumed at that stage that we would go off to Ballynahinch to the Assumption, where probably most of the girls who would have been going on to, there was still the 11 plus, as it was at that stage, would have gone on to Ballynahinch. Now, the nuns at that stage said, oh, no, boarding will be closing down in 2 years' time, so nobody was being encouraged to take up a boarding school place there, and it wasn't possible to go there as a day girl. Hence, Mum decides I'm going to the academy. Now, the Alliance Party, and I see Breege here, the Alliance Party were vibrant and happening and the new thing on the block, and people were excited about the Alliance Party back then. My father was dyed-in-the-wool SDLP, but Mum was Alliance, absolutely to her core. And I would have heard these sort of terms in the house without having the slightest clue what they were about. So Mum saw sending her eldest child off to the academy as a very Alliance thing to do. Not so my father, and not so the local parish priest, who was one of my father's best friends. And there would have been lots of kind of stern, consternation in the house. Is this the right thing for the parish? Is this the right thing for you as a family? The word detribalize, I heard that a few times. Nonetheless, if you'd ever met my mother, and I miss her every day, you would have known that only one person was going to win that argument. And off to the academy I went. I knew nothing about being a Catholic or not being a Catholic then. You're 11 years of age and it doesn't really mean anything. But I remember just turning up in my uniform and being absolutely delighted to get to play hockey, to get to netball. I didn't know a single person, not a single person. Now my maiden name was Keenan, and towards the end of that first year, I first got called Fenian. And I thought, what's a Fenian? I've never heard of that. And I went home and said to Mum, and she just ignore that. Don't respond to that at all. And then, of course, being called Keenan almost rhymed with Fenian. So I got called Keenan the Fenian. And around that time, I met somebody else in my year who had come in from the country, was a proper culture, and she was called Heenan. She's here. And she also got called Heenan the Fenian. So we bonded over Heenan and Keenan the Fenian, and became quite recognisable for that. Nonetheless, it was, for the most part, a very happy school life. There were things to navigate, which you would just imagine through those times. And what struck me really quite recently was that for years, decades now, I'm 58 years of age now, and for decades I talked about nothing really happened in Banbridge during the Troubles, nothing really at all. There was one prominent murder of the father of someone Deirdre and I went to school with, a savage murder of a Catholic policeman. But other than Sean Quinn's death, nothing else struck out in my mind until I read Martin Doyle's book, Dirty Linen, which was, I don't know if anybody has read it. Has anybody read it? Anybody know? Great. Okay, thanks, Tricia. Martin Doyle is the literary editor of the Irish Times, and he was the year ahead of Deirdre and I at school. Now, when I'm talking about Banbridge Academy in the years 1979 to 1986, you're talking under 30 Catholics, maybe, I would say. Probably not any more than that in a school of 900 odd. And Martin was the year ahead of us and was very good and very studious and quite quiet. And I didn't really know him at all other than nodding terms. And he lived outside the town. When I opened his book and started to read it, I had to slow down reading it, and ever slower read it, and ever slower read it, because I was horrified and heartbroken to realise that every chapter that he talked about in the book, I knew the families. I did know them. I knew lots of people whose lives were destroyed in the Troubles. And it hurts me to this day that I think of that as being something that didn't really happen. And I know our parents at that time, those of us who were reared in that time, shielded us as a survival technique. It was a coping mechanism that you don't talk about things like that, that you keep it, because it didn't land at your front door. So therefore, it didn't really happen. But I went through the book being just so struck by how many lives were decimated on my front doorstep and just beyond. And I really hadn't taken it on. And the ramifications decades later, because he went into such work in such detail, interviewing families, to talk about the legacy of that kind of trauma years later. He then wrote a chapter called Banbridge Academy, I think it's called Banbridge Academy, A Cold House for Catholics. I bristled a little and thought, no, it was not. No, it was not. And yet I read again slowly every page and went, oh yes, now that's true. Oh gosh, yes, that is. And the things that we accepted this is progress, guys. The things that we accepted back then, that we apologise on behalf of the people who said them nearly, so that they didn't feel uncomfortable about saying, really very unpleasant things. That could never happen now, thank God. But it did happen then, and you absorb it and you assimilate it, and somehow it probably changes you, and it's probably to some extent why I'm sitting here as an Alliance Mayor of Ards North Down. So I left Banbridge Academy and went off to Liverpool. And there, my family by that stage, I had started to vote Alliance, of course, as well. And things were moving, in Northern Ireland terms, and very slowly and inexorably in directions. But when you get over to a really political city like Liverpool, it was literally a breath of fresh air for me. I signed up to the Labour Party in the first week there, and there was the poll tax, and there was Maggie, and there was Section 28. There were, and again, things that seem staggering now, but we did go out and march for them there, and we did make real integral changes to society during that time. It wasn't very long after the Toxteth riots as well, so it was a great sort of political grounding in political activism, and just how you can create a sense of belonging, which I talk a lot about, but also a sense of community around politics. It is really just people. There's not much more to it than that. And I had all sorts of fabulous ideas about how I was going to travel the world in the year out that I was going to do before going on to qualify as a solicitor at the College of Law in England. At that stage, I decided I wasn't going back to Northern Ireland. And I came home and I said, Mum, I'm going to go on a year travelling, I'm going to gap year. And she said, not with that overdraft, you're not. And off I was sent to start applying back in the Belfast Telegraph, on the Tuesday and Thursday in the back of the ads. So one of the interviews I did was with a man called John Laird. Now, does anybody remember John Laird? Yes, Tricia, you're nodding there. So John Laird was a Stormont MP, Unionist MP back in the day, and in the old Stormont as was. And when he left sort of frontline elected rep politics, he opened up a public relations company. And now, let me see, this would have been 1990-ish anyway. Anybody with a head for dates, maybe Viv would remember, this is when fair employment legislation had just come in. And if you had over 10 employees, I think it was, you had to strike a balance. You had to bring someone from another faith in. You usually were talking about you had to bring a Catholic in. So I am called back for a second interview, which surprised me because the first one hadn't really gone very well. So the second one, I am sitting in the boardroom on the Hollywood Road in the heart of East Belfast, which is not easy to get to from Banbridge, I can tell you. And I'm sitting in this boardroom, and there's one other person left beside me, and we've been set a task, which is write a press release about blah-de-blah. And I sit and stare at this for about 10 minutes because I have no idea what a press release is. This is a girl who's applied for a job as a trainee public relations consultant, but there's no such thing as Google then. You can't just look it up. Nobody seemed to know either, so I had thought, I'll just wing it. I thought, well, that guy, I'll make eye contact, and I went, sorry, can you tell me what a press release is? And in a very sneery kind of voice, he went, well, I'm hardly going to tell you that when I'm in, and against you for this job. And I was like, right, well, okay. So I wrote probably a load of absolute nonsense, got called in for the interview, blah-de-blah-de-blah at the end of it. And then John Laird goes, so you went to St. Mary's Primary School, and you went to Banbridge Academy, and you went to live it, and you went, look, are you a Catholic? And I kind of like flustered, and St. Peter kind of came to me, can I deny him a Catholic? I don't want to deny him a Catholic, but at the same time, I'm sure he's not supposed to ask me that. And eventually he went, no, I didn't say it, and out I went. I did get the job. But do you know who was down in the boardroom that didn't help me with the press release, which I was delighted to find out later? Ian Paisley Jr. So, 3 years there in John Laird's, and I discovered that I could write, that I could talk to people, that I learned an enormous amount in that time about the value of the message and about, the message is everything, and actually communication, which all of us struggle with in some kind of circumstances, but it really is essential, and it's not one form of communication that works, it's just whatever the situation calls for, being able to adapt to that. And I discovered that I could do that quite well. I hated PR for sausages, or PR for buns, or PR for vases, or whatever, but I loved the lobbying. I loved getting over to Westminster. I loved that sort of representation. And when I left, that was the bit that I took with me, and I thought, I know I like that. But I did want to get back to law. I went to the Institute, and an old family friend of mine that Viv has referred to, a great friend of the Ferguson family here. That is actually how I met the Hollywood Fergusons, Eamon McAvoy. And Eamon was my master, my mentor, and my great friend for many years until he died far too young at the age of 64, leaving us all bereft. But not before he gave me a very sound training in litigation. And always, don't forget to care, Jill. That was always what he said, when we were getting kind of into a really horrible part of a case, which was dragging on, and you felt like you weren't getting anywhere, and the clients were driving you mad, and he went, don't forget to care, Jill. And that stayed with me, because he really did care. So then I got married. I didn't intend to have 3 children under 2.5, but I did, and life was very, very, very busy, and I must say I did thank God for my work, as I got out the door every day and got to go to the toilet by myself, and someone brought me cups of tea and people said thank you. And I really loved working. Then I had settled in Bangor West at that stage, and Bangor West was a wonderful community, like a little an oasis community within Bangor, which can kind of feel like a series of towns really in other ways. And I actually left behind that when I was at the Institute. That was when I came back from Liverpool, that I joined the Alliance Party. And that was a really formative time, actually, because that was just as the Tories were about to be ousted by Tony Blair. So I campaigned in South Belfast and in Derry, actually, for a person who was a student actually at Queen's, Lara McElroy, and she stood against John Hume. Didn't work out. In fact, she didn't even get her deposit back. But it was great experience in canvassing. That was my first experience of knocking doors around South Belfast, knocking doors in Derry. A lot warmer welcome in South Belfast than in the waterside. That was the Derry area we were going for. But nonetheless, and these two are laughing at me here, and you can imagine just, you know, me in my DM boots and really short spiky hair then, you know, knocking on these doors in Derry and getting them slammed in our face. But sure, we thought we were great. We didn't mind at all. So that then, you know, getting into trusteeship, being approached by the parish, and I suppose when you're A, a woman, and B, a lawyer, and I know there's a few of us in the room here, you do often get asked to come on to committees to, you know, provide some skills, often back then anyway, to provide some balance in terms of gender. So I got asked to go on to a couple of parish committees in St Comgall's, and then I became the chair of their board of governors at the primary school, which was also the primary school that my three older children went to. And those were very happy years there. I loved being a school governor. It gave you a great insight into what was actually going on in your own child's school, as well as a great overview of what's actually happening in education, what is good about our education system and what's definitely not great as well. And then PTA is kind of like being, and I suppose I was always someone who just said, oh, I'll go on to that committee or I'll go on to that. And that, you know, that's another way of belonging. If you're new to a community, join a committee, join a community group. Join something, you know, that's how you meet people and that's how you integrate, or certainly it was for me. And yeah, then I suppose really moved here to Hollywood in 2011, and you know, there was a sense of that as like coming home in a sense, and also for me getting a little bit closer to Belfast as well, because the girl from the sticks had, you know, wanted to get away from the sticks, and kind of staying near to Belfast felt like a good idea. So joined our local association here, which, you know, was just ticking away nicely. And Oliver was still alive then, and there was lots. This has always, I suppose, really been the heartbeat of Alliance here in Hollywood, not least because the Napiers lived here, but also it probably is the most integrated area, and that's just because there's a willingness in terms, you know, this word inclusion is bandied around enough, you know, but will it be really inclusive? Well, you're included. It's up to you whether you want to be there, whether you want to take part. So, you know, being included is as much your choice as anybody else's. And I think Hollywood people choose to be inclusive every single day, several times a day. So we came back here, and at one stage, Viv was talking about the children in certain dimension schools. At one stage, I had 5 children at 4 different schools. And you know, each of them was at the right place for them at the particular time. It does sound mad, you know, and there's definite madness around at that time, but they were all where they needed to be. One of my children had special needs, and they were always where they needed to be at the particular time. So decisions can be made on the basis of, you know, what your children need, and that can change from time to time as well. So then some of my dear friends here I met at St Patrick's Primary School then, and those were really happy years. There was lots going on in my personal life. My husband was very ill at the time, and even though I'd moved to the community, that community put their arms around me immediately and held me up and picked up groceries and lifted children and minded them for an hour while you might be in hospital longer than you meant to be, or on your way to something else. And there was a lot of drama going on in our family life, which I will forever be grateful to people, some of them in this room, for the way they held my family up during that quite prolonged period of time. And so then at that stage, I had stopped work, and I had worked as a solicitor for about 20 years, primarily plaintiff, personal injury litigation. I've been lucky enough to work in a firm in Eamon McAvoy's where there was a superb level of attention for clients who had sustained life-changing injuries, so catastrophic injuries like spinal cord severing or brain damage during birth. So a lot of my medical negligence experience would have come from that time, and I went on then to a firm and did a lot of medical negligence then, which is work that is very, very meaningful. It's very absorbing and it's quite intense. You might only work on a handful of cases like that at any one time, and you really do become quite intimately involved in those families' lives. So I thought I would never enjoy a job as much as I enjoyed being a public relations consultant, and then I became a solicitor. And then I thought I wouldn't enjoy a job as much as a solicitor as when I became a councillor. And then I thought I wouldn't enjoy a job as much as when I became mayor. So if I go through those years then that I was at home when my husband was very ill and things were going on in the family, there was just a lot going on at that time. We were fortunate enough, we were privileged to be able to afford to have me at home, which not everyone can, and I'm very, very grateful that I was able to be at home at that very difficult time and to hold the fort. And if I look back on anything in my life where, you know, the word sort of resilience or grit comes in, and that's where I taught myself grit, because that was tough that time then, and it became the easiest thing in the world to ask for help, because, you know, sometimes we go, oh, I'm not asking for help, but it actually then became really easy to ask for help, and you don't get anywhere in life without people's support, and, you know, most of the times we do have to just put ourselves out there and ask for it. And I don't think I've ever not had someone come through for me when I've asked for help, which is wonderful. So, yes, I then, well, God, the kids and the more and the blah, blah, blah. I have 5 children, Catherine, Anna, Oliver, Benedict and Genevieve. Catherine is a urologist in Glasgow, and she's now 31. Anna is a paediatrician in Dublin. She's just become engaged. And Oliver is a solicitor in London. And then there was a great 8-year gap where anyone with a bit of sense might have stopped. Apologies, Paige. But I went on to have another 2, and that was Benedict and Genevieve. Benedict started Edinburgh University last year studying film, and Genevieve, the baby, has left me and is doing weirdo law and politics in Dublin. So I miss her, but it was a big part of saying, you know what, I think I might do that mayor thing or throw my hat in the ring for that. So back then, I'm going to go back to 2019 here in Hollywood, and I was on the PTA of this and the PTA of that and the Board of Governors of this and the Board of Governors of that. And then I thought, you know, there's so much of this Department of Education. I'm not over the detail of what should be going on. And I wanted to be angrier and probably to have more influence than I did simply as a governor. And so I went back home, politically home, to the Alliance Party and rejoined the association here. Actually, I was still a paying member and invited to things like any of you would be if you were, but I decided to actually go out because the 2019 elections were coming up, and I decided I'm going to go back out on the streets again. And that was a great time, and obviously 2019 went really, really well for us. 2022 went even better for us, and I was loving campaigning. I was on a couple of the executive committees and the policy committees, and I loved all of that. And Andrew Muir then came as we were coming up to council elections, and there had been what has been described or has been described as the Alliance surge, and indisputably the Alliance Party had grown quite exponentially in that relatively short period of time. And they wanted to run what we call sleeper candidates in various constituencies, not necessarily with the ambition of saying, could you actually get another one in, but seeing how far you could stretch it. You're not really going to know unless you put another candidate in. So I was asked if at that stage, I was chair of the Board of Governors in St Anne's in Donaghadee, and was asked would I stand down there as the second candidate. And you don't get really marketed very much as the second candidate, because you don't want to hurt the vote of the first candidate. So I was, no, I don't want to do that. And Andrew said, oh, come on, you'll never get in. And I went, well, can you guarantee I won't get in? And he was like, well, no, I can't guarantee it, but that's high. I mean, this is where Jamie Bryson lives. Okay. And I'm like, right, fair enough, okay. So the first deeply alarming thing was when the posters go up. And that is not for the faint-hearted, saying a giant-sized version of yourself staring down from a lamppost. I remember Sheena Ferguson actually texted me, and I've nearly driven off the road. There's a gigantic U on the Groom's Court Road going in. She was going in for a swim or something. And, but thankfully I didn't live around there, so I didn't have to actually look at them very often. And then I took my tribe, my ready-made tribe of kids, and my nanos, and there's a couple of other areas here, out with me on the canvassing trail, and we had huge fun. And it was just a wonderful a sense of camaraderie that's quite difficult to explain unless you've actually been in it, and to know that you kind of knew in your heart it was working and it was going, and it wasn't from the kind of noise on the doors from people who said, I've never voted Alliance in my life, but I am going to vote Alliance now. And that, for those communities down there, that was something they wouldn't have done in a generation or more. It would have felt alien to them to vote anything other than for one of the traditional unionist parties. But there was definite sense of wanting to turn away from a very polarised way of politicking. So anyhow, yes, I remember standing in the count and listening. And I didn't, there were 6 seats available for Bangor East and Donaghadee, and I got into number 5, which was quite shocking, shocked the party as well. Didn't shock the party as much as shocked me, and I genuinely had not prepared for getting in, and I was kind of thinking, what does a councillor do? What does a councillor do? I had zero idea, absolutely no idea whatsoever. Now, I never regretted it for a second, but it staggers me now that I put myself forward for that without actually thinking that I might get in and I might end up, doing it, having to do it. And the other thing that struck me then, and I see Deirdre Vaughan here, and Deirdre and I had a conversation about that in the count back then, and that was just the whole changing face of politics. Because down the peninsula, for the first time ever, Sinn Féin had stood a candidate. And and I can remember at the time, being a product of my generation, thinking, Ards North Down, the Ards Peninsula, how is a Sinn Féin candidate even going to get one vote? Ha, ha, ha. Now, that candidate only very narrowly failed to get a seat. And interestingly, the long-standing, probably decades-long, Deirdre, Joe Boyle, his vote was almost untouched. So those were entirely new voters. Joe's vote hadn't changed. These new voters had come from somewhere. And this isn't a very big area, so they'd come from somewhere. And I remember talking about this, to my colleague, where did they come from? They were just delighted Alliance had done so well, and blah, 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 and we'd got another, I think, 3 or 4 seats at that. But I remember thinking, the world has changed now. And when I spoke to my daughter, Anna, who had gone to Our Lady in St Patrick's later that night, I was going, gosh, and I was really surprised. And she went, but Mum, loads of my friends down the peninsula vote for Sinn Féin. And I was kind of like clutching my pearls and going, what, how could this be? And she said, our generation do not think about Sinn Féin the way you do. They see a progressive party who's providing opportunities for them, who's embracing who's willing to move and who's willing to move with them. And that gave me a real think, right, well, Alliance need to be speaking more to the youth. And we have a well-established youth section, but we're probably not giving them a big enough voice. And that is something that I've taken away with me from that time. So then, had to start trying to find out what a councillor did. So it was a very, very steep learning curve, and I am beyond blessed to have. So my co-councillor here in Hollywood is Alderman Martin McRandall, who's also a floating member of the parish. Martin's children went to St Patrick's, Martin and Patricia's children went to St Patrick's alongside mine, and Martin is just solid gold, and I am absolutely blessed to have him both as our party group leader at council, because his judgment is impeccable and he is the best shock absorber in the world. But also then when I moved, so I worked in Donaghadee for, I'm going to say maybe about a year and a half, and then a vacancy came up in Hollywood when one of our councillors here moved back down south. And I was like, please, let me move back home. Let me be a councillor in Hollywood and Clandeboy. And so they very reluctantly agreed to do that, as long as I filled my seat in Bangor East and Donaghadee, which I did with the principal of St Anne's Primary School. So I'm very proud of that, because John was already very well known to the community down there, and has been lovely for that community, particularly the Catholic community, to have an Alliance councillor in there that they know and trust very well. So coming home then to be a councillor in Hollywood was a bit of a shock, because three things I'd underestimated. First, this is far and away our biggest voter base, and people, when they have a problem, or a council or a community problem, they tend to ring the party that they vote for, and because most of our voters are here, they ring Alliance. So my phone started ringing pretty much straight away, which didn't happen in Donaghadee, which is a very, very different voter profile. And then also, Hollywood and Clandeboy is a massive DEA with all the council issues represented on it. So we've got leisure centres, we've got lots of beaches, we've got loads of parks, we've got forests, we've got a thriving high street, we have bonfires, we have flags. I'm trying to think, all of the issues basically that could affect a council area are represented in this very big, quite spread out area, because Conlig is part of my patch, Clandeboy is part of my patch, Crawfordsburn, Helens Bay, Craigavon, all the way out to here and up to Redburn and Lockview. So that was a very different kind of constituency to Bangor East and Donaghadee. Bangor East has one shop in it. In this massive population area, has one shop in it. And Donaghadee is a thriving community, but it's very, very small. And anyway, the phone didn't ring nearly as much. You could have another constituency like Bangor East, where there is other than St Congle's Church and the parish centre, there isn't really any kind of community centre to it. Maybe Rathmore Road, a couple of shops there. So those areas are missing the huge range of issues that we have going on here. And I suppose then the third thing was I was quite well known. So people already had my number, and so I've been very busy since I arrived here, and I can honestly say I have never been happier in my life or more fulfilled. What is local government like compared to Assembly, Westminster level? I'm often asked that. Do you want to go on to Stormont? Which Viv, and I'm sure John Ferguson, Margaret, how often are we solicitors said, would you like to have gone on to be a barrister? QI role. It's a very different job. It's a completely different job, is it not, Denise? It's not the same job. And that's exactly what I would say about, it's a very different job being an MLA. And for me, probably working at local government level is both easier and harder than Westminster or Stormont. It's easier because we're right here, we're right in the middle of it. We, all the issues come to us. We know people, we can sit down in their homes and talk to them one-to-one. But we're also further away from a lot of the solutions that those people need, that those issues require to resolve them. So with proximity to the problems, but we've also a distance from a lot of the solutions, and we're constrained by other levels of government in what we can do. But nonetheless, we can do an awful lot. It's not just bins, it's job creation, it's ending violence against women and girls. Community safety is a massive part of what I do on the committees that I sit on. We've got huge capital projects like marine gardens, which has been talked about, the Bangor waterfront. We have our leisure centres. We have a new greenway, £5.6 million greenway opening up between Newton Ards and Cumber. We're looking after beaches. We're looking after the parks. I was today at a park celebration. We have towns, and actually with Hollywood Chamber, their AGM is going on at the minute, I'm missing that. With their chamber, we're trying to get Hollywood in bloom going again. So if any of you fancy getting your hands dirty, getting your green fingers greened up, Hollywood in bloom, we're trying to reinvigorate that for the town here, because some of our towns in the borough, again, Donaghadee, are just exceptional at that. And it has lovely layers of connectivity going out from it as well, in terms of combating loneliness, newcomers being invited in, putting our arms around newcomers, other communities, bringing them in, people with learning difficulties, finding space for them to be able to create and to belong. So Genevieve, my youngest, was leaving in September, just past, and I could see this coming. I was like staring down the barrel of a gun. First time in 31 years, my nest is going to be empty. I'm going to not have a child in the house. And I genuinely had never thought about being mayor in the same way, as you probably gathered by now. I haven't really looked very hard ahead to find out what the next plan is. But the call went out for standing for mayor, and I kind of thought, now that would keep me busy for a year or so. That would put in the year. And I thought about it, I hummed and had, and talked to the kids, and they said, you are much more likely to regret not going for this than you are to regret going for it. Whatever happens, it's nearly always, isn't it, guys, the things that we don't do that we regret rather than the things that we do. So I threw my hat in the ring, and that was probably all the things that, and I'm used to speaking in public, but to actually canvass for yourself, not on the doorsteps of houses for people that you don't know, but to canvass for yourself among your own colleagues, your own peers, is one of the most exquisitely mortifying things I have ever done in my life. Because you can't kid a kidder. So you're sitting in a room of people who know exactly what you can contribute, and not 1 ounce more will they believe. And you're there asking them to pick you to represent them. And we're an ambitious party. I had competition for this. And genuinely, I bring different things to the role, but each of the other 2 candidates would have been excellent mayors as well. So what I was really only as I was pitching, when I was standing up in front of my party colleagues in my association, that I realised how much I wanted it. And that was when it gets really scary, when you actually really want something. And I knew I would be disappointed. It wouldn't have changed my life, when I'd moved on to something else. But I then realised, and I was jubilant when I got it. And I set to straight away. I had about 6 weeks before it would be made public. And I set to straight away. And I knew instantly what I wanted to do with my mayoral year. So we've had a really hard year last year on council, with very, very negative, divisive issues being brought before council, which are purely designed to drive a wedge in these communities, to create power on one side over another. And that dividing of communities is something I really detest about our political system. And I know we are seeing it happening in different guises all over the world now with the, we talk about the rise of populism. We've had it here for a very long time, and it's been emboldened by people like Donald Trump. It's actually given an extra sense of entitlement to that right to say whatever you want and damn the consequences. So that there has been quite a lot about, particularly quite vicious racism and nuanced and not nuanced at all anti-immigrant messages coming out from some members of our council. So I was belonging. Belonging is my theme for my mayoral year, and I pitched to the association on that, and it struck a note with them. So what did I do? Belonging. Well, I started off with, I got a chance to pick the charities. So I knew instantly who I was going to pick. I didn't have to think about it at all. I care very, very deeply about domestic abuse. And I have sat for a long time on various allied associations and with Women's Aid, and I sit on our policing and community safety partnership at council, which does really, really great work in the community, in our community groups, here in Hollywood, in Donaghadee, in Beachville, and various estates around the place. So North Down and Ards Women's Aid, that was an easy one for me to start with. I already had a connection with them. Orchardville, two very good friends of mine have members of their family who are daily attendants at Orchardville, and I know at first hand the incredible work they do in our communities of families who are living with learning difficulties and autism. If you know anything about that journey, you'll know that there's lots and lots of structure and support until around about 18, and then families fall off a cliff in terms of the services that are available to them. Places like Orchardville are beacons of respite, of hope, of access to education, to the potential of employment, to actual employment, to support through employment. And if employment isn't for them, for really quality activities and a sense of belonging, a sense of community, they enable families to work still. And also with two of the families that I know best, they provide one night a week a social club where that family can go out as a family, knowing that their loved one is having the time of their lives along with their pals. And in fact, one of the families that I am closest to, a fabulous romantic relationship has blossomed at Orchardville, which is absolutely lovely. And then finally, St Vincent de Paul. So my family were St Vincent de Paul volunteers back in the day, and there has never been so much need for the incredible work that St Vincent de Paul do. Are there any of you volunteers here with the conference here? Yeah, okay. Well, thank you. Thank you so much for your service in the community. And I know they're absolutely inundated. So Sean Johnson would be my contact. Sean's actually a party member and an activist, so it was very easy to bring Sean in. So that Ards conference would be the ones that are our point of contact. But the money that we raise through the Mayor's Charities will be disseminated around all of the conferences. So the level of training, the level of commitment that is required of SVP volunteers is extraordinary, and the dignity and just the honesty and the compassion that they bring to their service at that point of need, when people are very often desperate. There might be addiction, there might be mental health problems. There are a whole myriad of problems that might have led them to pick up the phone, but what you do is just incredible and humbling. So then that was, I expressed belonging through the charities that I chose, and then I went, chaplains. So it was pretty obvious I was going to pick Father Stephen, and then I thought, but I'm a Lions Party and I'm going to make this look good as well, as back to the PR days. So I had the great privilege of meeting Marcine Stanfield, who is the minister of First Presbyterian in Bangor. She is a very proud Scot, and she quite notoriously took on the Presbyterian Church in Ireland about 3 or 4 years ago, when they were threatening to bring in various rules, actually, that would inhibit, or in fact leading to downright preventing women from going through the ministry. And Mercy was very much involved in calling that out, and the misogyny in that. She also, in her ministry in Ballynahinch, founded, along with some other church leaders, the Hub, which some of you might have heard of, the Hub counselling services, and that was in response to, you might remember, there were really tragic series of suicide pacts of young teenagers around the country, and they set up the Hub in response to that. And she also has a quite transformative youth project called The Edge, which she's in. So I put her and Stephen in a room together over lunch maybe about a month ago, and they knew so many people in common, and they had so much in common themselves. It was one of the most heartwarming kind of connections I've seen blossom in front of my very eyes. And Stephen, of course, has enormous compassion gleaned through all his years of service, but he is also a very pragmatic man. He's no dozer. He knows exactly where issues originate and where they need to be addressed. So that has been a very lovely part. I actually have my installation dinner on Friday night, which will be the first time the two chaplains have come together publicly. And they'll kind of have like a face-off over grace or something like that. So, what else? Anything else? Do you want me to stop there?
That was fantastic, I have to say. It really was. And without a note.
Ooh, yeah.
What a clever lady. Real pleasure to hear you, Gillian. I've known you a long time, but I didn't know all that, and I know a lot more about the political scene in North Down, and I wish you all the very best with your year, and I also wish you all the very best with your meteoric ascent to the top of the political ladder.
I think that'll do.
I'm not going to give you too much more praise, but it really was fantastic to hear you. We're going to have some questions now. If anyone who's here this evening would like to ask Gillian a question. Political lady down the back.
Not hard, Deirdre, please.
Thank you so much, Gillian. That was really interesting, and thank you for being so candid with us. I think that theme of belonging is so important, and I'm so glad that you've sort of struck on that, because from my canvassing, I was really struck by the levels of isolation and loneliness in our community. And I'm not just talking about, elderly people, it's people of all demographics, young people, sort of single parents, would spend a long time just like talking to me, God love them, because, they hadn't actually sort of talked to another human being in quite a while. And I think you sort of did mention briefly about work that may be going on at the council level to address loneliness, and I just wonder, can you tell me a bit more about what you think can be achieved at council level?
Yeah, that is something, Deirdre, that we do encounter. It's a real privilege to be in a position, as I say, at local government level. MLAs, MPs are so much more removed from people's homes than we are. We are very frequently invited into people's homes, and a bit of it is like responding to, being that kind of fixer side of being a solicitor as well, where you're listening to the problem and you're going off to see if you can find a solution somewhere. So at council level, people think of council as bins. It is so much more than bins. And I have nothing but good experiences from the vast majority of our officers who are, we call the people who work for council officers, who are working in the community groups. So there are a whole raft of things. So if I think, what's driving the loneliness, I suppose, that might be the first thing. Well, what is actually driving is this person a newcomer, maybe, to the area? do they have English as a first language? There's a whole raft of measures at council for people who don't have English as a first language, for signposting them into, depending on what part of the borough that they're in, for signposting them towards groups that are there to support our newcomers, our migrant families. Last week before last, I went to Ards to a meeting of the Ards Islamic Society. I had no idea what that was going to be, but I'd been asked by the Policing and Community Partnership, Safety Partnership, to come along to it. It was probably one of the most heartwarming events I have been at since I became a councillor. It was a room full of women from Syria, from Bangladesh, from Kerala, from Malaysia. The majority of them were refugees. They were settled refugees. Some of them were asylum seekers, but the majority were settled refugees. Good number of them had English. Those who didn't have English were very isolated, Deirdre. Very, very isolated. So, coming here, we do, there are things that we can provide, but that first language thing is a big barrier to get over first. But what council had done was support. Now, there's a fantastic lady there, Rowena. She is the public face of that, but she's the only public face, because those communities are experiencing so much savage, violent racism that they are not prepared to come out and be advocates yet. She's been here for decades, and she's a member of the ambulance service. I'm married to a white man from Newton Ards, but that's what gives her that strength to be able to be a public face of that. The rest of the ladies there weren't. There was no social media, no phones, no pictures, because they are living in fear. So council have supported that group to have it was Chai, Chat and Connect. And they have a series that they move around different places in the borough. Council supports them to, transport to get to and from areas. So that one comes to mind off the top of my head because those communities are very isolated without the support. And if we keep giving them support, someone else will join Rowena in being public, and then someone else will join them, and then their children will have English as a first language and will make white friends from the, and that's how they will break down, because they will then belong and they will feel that they belong. But they used, without knowing anything about my theme, in her speech to her community, she said the word belonging about 5 times. That it was everything to them. So back to St Vincent de Paul, nothing isolates us like poverty, nothing. And we cannot be integrated, we cannot feel we belong when we are stricken with poverty. So council support charities like St Vincent de Paul. There are others as well. There will never be enough money to fix all of those problems, but in terms of community grants for community associations that are are based in socially deprived areas, there's a couple in mind. So on our doorstep we have Redburn and Lockview Estate. That's an area of social deprivation, but there are phenomenal community groups in there doing incredible work, supported by council. Those women in there are particularly geared towards programs that will tackle violence against women and girls. So they have been getting their young girls and young boys involved in being safe relationship ambassadors, what a safe relationship looks like. More importantly, what does it feel like? They've been getting them out at Hooked, the boxing studio down on the high street there. They've been getting them out there doing self-defense classes. Not that they need, that they're hoping that they're going to defend themselves, but that they're giving them an attitude of kind of inner strength and a kind of core belief in themselves. They are trying, it's not easy. There's a huge amount of work to be done there, and we've got a constant tide working against us on that, but they are trying to enable those communities to be more embracing of newcomers, and by that I mean our immigrant families. There's a lot of work still to do there. We have a huge number of mental health support services that are supported under council under an umbrella there. We have an age-friendly, this is the oldest borough in Northern Ireland by quite some distance. So it's a real priority at council because again, isolation and loneliness is particularly prevalent in among our older community. I'd say maybe in the last 3 or 4 weeks, I've gone to 2 age-friendly events. One actually, a neighbour of mine phoned me and she said there was a positive ageing event in Ards, which was a kind of like a fair for age-positive services around the borough. And there would have been things like community advice, you know, how to manage benefits and your pension and those kind of things for older people. So many older people have no idea of the amount of benefits that they're entitled to. I sit on the board of community advice, what used to be known as citizens advice. And last, Gemma, are you involved in that? Somebody from the borough, Una McAvoy is. Last term, they reported a 90-year-old lady who had been unaware that she had a widow's pension. And she had not claimed it from the day and hour she became entitled to it. She was relying on another very small work pension that she'd had before. And she had been living in abject poverty for about 22 years. So the guys sorted that for her. She got nearly £1 million. It's staggering. And it was back paid, every last bit of it. That was a bit of a payday for her family anyway, because there's no way she was going to be able to spend all of that. So yes, those community advice is another one of our partner agencies that is very much, along with St. Vincent de Paul, that's very much supported by council, and we councillors sit on, like I could talk on and on about our age-friendly strategy. We've opened a flagship dementia garden in Ward Park. If any of you have relatives with dementia, do bring them up there for it. Not just for the relatives, but for yourselves as well. It's one of the most zen, lovely places that you could spend. You can go into the library and have a cup of tea. And we very much aim to open them all around the borough. I could take you a lot.
Just in case anyone in the room thinks that the councillors don't do anything, you know, that's fantastic. Really is heartwarming stuff. One more question. 2 guys down the back. They're going to have to fight.
I'd like you go first there. First thing I would say, Gillian, is we're all very good at having a pop at politicians. What we don't do is congratulate them for the courage that they have to stand up and speak and say the things that maybe we all think, but we're not courageous enough to do that. And I think what I've heard tonight is maybe you doing your apprenticeship for better things to come. That's the good part, Gillian. The next part is I've been reared on the SDLP, and I've voted SDLP all my life. And the only time I ever vote Alliance, I never put a next to Alliance, but I'll maybe put a 3 or a 4, because she's a nice person, and he's a nice guy in the talk sense. But I don't have the courage of my convictions. But I believe that what Alliance have been trying to do since the days of Bob Cooper and Oliver Napier is to make this place a better place. And you mentioned the Alliance surge, and my opinion is the Alliance surge is based on people who have lent you their vote. And I now think is the time for Alliance. You can't lose, because you'll always have a core vote. But the people down in the Ards, the young people who are voting Sinn Féin, because they have a machine, and young people like winners. And I think it's time for Alliance to really put yourself out there and say that, you know, you talked about how in the Assembly there are people who create division. and that gets us nowhere. But I think the party that can really push us on is Alliance. But it's convincing people like me that 2s and 3s are no good. We need
2s and
X's.
3s are no good, I'm afraid.
Yeah. So congratulations on what you do. The very best of luck going forward. And I look at one of your colleagues, Sorka Eastwood, and I see her standing in Westminster, and I just think, good on you, girl. And I'm sure there's a lot more within the party. So the very best of luck, and I'll maybe look forward to the day that I give you an X or a 1.
Well, we'll aim for that. I agree with everything you've said. Where we go next is we have had such an iconic leader in Naomi Long, who was a very big breath of fresh air. Alliance was very nice middle class kind of party who, you know, were all things to everybody for a long time. And in came this loud-mouthed, sassy woman from the Lower Newton Ards Road. And she blew away all the safety out of, and the kind of, you know, the niceness out of it. And she really, she captured something for a lot of people. And the amazing thing was how Alliance's core, you know, the people in North Down that would have, you know, died on their sword for Oliver and for everybody around here. I'm actually thinking of Sean Neeson and those other types around there. In came Naomi offering something completely different as well, but yet she was still taken up by the hardcore, hardcore doesn't sound the right word, but you know, the more established kind of face, the safer face of Alliance. And in a way, it could have gone very badly wrong, but it didn't. You know, she really came in, and she always sounded like someone who had, and truly is, I believe, the courage of her convictions. You know, where we go now. So you mentioned Sorka Eastwood. We also have someone who never fails to impress me in our party is our newish deputy leader, Owen Tennyson. And one of the things about Owen is he is utterly fearless, and will, you know, calls everybody out all over the place. Deirdre is up and said to me, but I wish he wasn't so angry. But he is very angry. And probably, maybe Alliance haven't been angry enough. You know, maybe we haven't done enough. Maybe part of, like, somebody like me whose raison d'etre is really to get on with everybody and to belong, you know. And somebody like Owen isn't that worried about what you think of him, and you know, maybe that's what. But I feel that that's where our future will inevitably lie, in people like him. He's only 25, and he's incredibly bright, you know. So those guys, and there's not only him. There's a lot like him further down the party. But make no mistake, we are dealing with really toxic politics now, and I worry very much. We have got another set of elections coming up soon, and for people like me, who, believe it or not, are really conflict averse, you know, the thought of these next elections and coming in and to fighting for them. And depending on where we're canvassing, we are called Sinn Féin IRA Alliance. Sinn Féin IRA Alliance, like as if, you know. And then, but my colleagues up in North Belfast are called UDA Alliance. So, you know, everybody likes to take a pop at Alliance, just depending on where, you know, where they're shouting from. So yes, but I think we still go back to our core messages are equality, inclusion, embracing diversity. You know, my version of that is saying belonging. You know, that is still what the core of us is about. And I think getting sucked into that's what, I mean, if you look at the debacle of the last, you know, the political stunt that was our Minister for Education's trip to, nothing more than that. It was a political stunt, and it was absolutely designed to do what has happened, which is, you know, to polarize people. And I think Alliance's role really just has to stay true to digging down and not getting sucked into that, offering people a different way. And I think that would be where my personal integrity is, that, as far as I'm concerned, I'm still a Catholic girl who grew up in Banbridge, where the majority of my friends from that period are from a Protestant Unionist tradition, and they are still my friends to this day. They're still my close friends to this day. My way, my being in Alliance was my way of us all belonging together. So I think that's still, that sense of inclusion and integration is still what I want out of this society here.
Okay, look, I'm afraid we probably don't have any more time for questions, but the good news is there's refreshments in now one of the room in the left as you go out. And I think we'd all like to do another round of applause for a wonderful evening's entertainment and very informative. Thank you very much, Gillian.